Hey guys, welcome to patternlab.london. Okay, so this week's pattern making tutorial, we're going to be making the basic wrap dress. This was suggested by Nora.barnacle on Instagram. That's Nora.barnacle. We'll put a link to it in the post. So she obviously wanted a very simple wrap dress, simplest illustration here. We haven't included sleeves on this, but this block you can also include the sleeve and create any kind of sleeve style you like using our sleeve tutorials or free sleeve pattern making tutorials. So to do this, we're going to need a basic block. So I've got the editable torso basic block. You can actually get this on Design Lab. This is the UK size 10, but it comes in UK 4 all the way up to 24, the entire pack. But this is just one of the ones that we've pulled out. Or you can obviously head over onto patternlab.london and you can actually draft the torso block to fit your measurements, or you can draft it made to measure to fit your measurements accurately. We have links to that at the bottom of this post, so feel free to have a look. Okay, so first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my big selection tool. Obviously, we're working in Adobe Illustrator, as always. I'm going to get my big selection tool, and just to mention, we have a lot of free pattern making tutorials. We have the basics, which it shows you how to use Adobe Illustrator as a pattern making platform. Just simply head over to the patternlab.london website and go to our courses page and then digital pattern making. And it'll show you step by step, about 7 or 8 tutorials, how to actually use Adobe Illustrator as a pattern making platform and edit these blocks. So really useful tutorials. And they're all free, of course. And obviously once you've done that, you can start drafting this block. So as I said, what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to get my big selection tool. I'm just going to select, click and drag over all of these blocks here. I'm going to go File, and then I'm going to go Edit, and then Copy. You can also do Command C on your keyboard, just like in Word documents. And I'm just going to create a new document. So File, New. And let's make it 490 by 490 centimeters, so we've got a huge space to work on. Once again, these patterns are full-scale patterns. Let's just click Create. Now, the reason why I'm making a brand new document is because I don't want to edit or mess up this, let's say this template here. I just want to simply copy it. So Control C to copy that, and then we're just going to paste it onto our board. As you can see, it's full size because this is about 5 meters by 5 meters. Let's just zoom in. You can use the Command plus on your keyboard to zoom in and Command minus to zoom out. Also, if you hold down the space key on your keyboard, you'll see you get a little hand where your cursor is. If you hold down the space key, you can click and drag, and that allows you to move around the page. So using the controls Command minus and Command plus, and also spacebar, click and drag, you can actually navigate around your patterns very easily. Really good idea to get the hang of these quite quickly. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. Let's just go to File and then Save As. We can put it on my desktop and we can call it Wrap Dress UK 10. Once again, I'm using a size UK 10. Let's just click Save and just click OK. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate these pattern pieces out. So I get my big selection tool, I'm going to click and just drag these apart. So it gives me a little bit of space to actually play with. Also, these blocks are grouped. By that, what I mean is if you click on the big selection tool here, you can see that they're all grouped elements. So what we need to do is basically start to remove some of these labels just to clean the block up so it's easy to use. So I'm going to my big selection tool, I'm just going to select all of these blocks together. I'm going to go Object and then Ungroup. I'm going to click, and as you can see, these are all in different group segmentations. So I'm just going to simply big selection tool, click on this label here, drag it off. Same with this one. Click, drag it off to the side here. We can add them back in later. We're not actually going to be focusing on the sleeve at all today, so that can just stay as it is over there. So let's zoom in on our torso blocks here. In fact, we can move that a little bit closer. So I'm just going to click and then drag it slightly over a bit more. We also want to make sure that the waistlines are lined up here. So I'm going to get my big selection tool, click and drag over both elements, and as you can see, this one's slightly higher, this one's slightly lower. I'm going to go to my align tools at the top. I'm just going to click this one, vertical align bottom, and as you can see, that has shifted it so it's perfectly in line with the bottom of those two blocks are now aligned, and that's looking good. Okay, so first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to separate these blocks up. Okay, we want the torso and the skirt to be separate. So I'm going to get my small selection tool, which is this little white one here, and I'm going to click on the outline of the pattern. So the small selection tool simply allows you to select individual elements within grouped objects. So if I get my big selection tool, you can see it's selecting everything, whereas the small selection tool allows me to pick up individual elements, which is really useful. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to get the outline, so small selection tool, click the outline of my block, go to the scissor tool, which is just here. And once again, we show you how to set up Adobe Illustrator as a pattern making platform in our previous tutorials, and it'll show you where to find all these tools and how to obviously lay them out for pattern making. So really helpful tutorial. Have a look at that if you're unsure of what these do. So I'm going to go to my scissor tool. I'm just going to snip here, I'm going to snip here, I'm going to snip along that waistline. And I'm just going to have to get my small selection tool. I have to click on this one, so you've got to select it before you can cut it, and then just go snip and snip. So now, if I get my small selection tool and click and drag over this bottom element, you can see it's been separated from the top, which is great. Let's do the same for the front. I'm going to select the outline here. I'm going to go snip and then snip with my scissor tool. Small selection tool, click on this dart, go to my scissor tool, and then just snip and snip. Great. So once again, these have now been separated, as I can see by using my small selection tool. However, the blocks are still grouped. So if I get my big selection tool and click, you can see they're all still grouped, which is fine, but we want to essentially separate the skirt from the bodice. So I'm going to get my big selection tool, click and drag over all of these, and go Object, and then Ungroup. And now, you see, they should all be ungrouped elements, which is great. Same for this one, they're all ungrouped elements. So what I'm going to do is get my big selection tool, I'm going to click and drag over all of the lower elements of the skirt here. And I'm just going to get my, I'm going to hold the shift key down on my keyboard, and I'm going to use the arrow key. So holding down the shift key, I'm going to use my arrow keys, and you can see that every time I hit the down arrow, it will move it down. You can go up, left, right, etc. down. So I'm just going to move that away from my skirt block, from my bodice block. Next, I'm going to actually complete or unite these panels. So first of all, if I just get my small selection tool here, I'm going to click and drag over these two endpoints. You see these two little endpoints here? I'm going to click and drag, I'm going to click right click and then join. Same with these ones, click and drag, right click, join. Same with these ones, right click, join. So this is the small selection tool, we're just clicking and dragging over those two endpoints, join. Also, we're going to get rid of these lines, we don't really need them anymore. So I'm going to get my small selection tool, I'm going to click, I'm going to hold down the shift key. This allows me to add to my selections. If I didn't hold it down, we would just be selecting individual elements here. So I'm going to click, hold down the shift key, click, 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 and then I'm just going to hit backspace. If I hit backspace once, you'll see we've still got the points left over. So you want to hit backspace a few times just to make sure those points have gone. Next, I'm going to get my small selection tool and do the same as I did with the skirt. So just click and drag over these two endpoints, join, click and drag, right click, join, click and drag, right click, join. This is my small selection tool, click and drag, right click, join. So these patterns are now completely separate and they've been united. So they're essentially two separate blocks. And now what I'll do is I'm going to join them. Oh, sorry, I'm going to group them because at the moment they're all individual elements. So I'm going to get my big selection tool, click and drag over this back piece and go Object, Group. Same for the front, click and drag, Object, Group. For the back skirt, click and drag, Object, Group. Front, click and drag, Object, Group. So now if I click on them, you can see they're all elements, or grouped elements, which is fantastic. So looking good. Okay, so first we're going to work on our bodice block when it comes to creating this beautiful wrap style. Let's just get rid of this. So we want to basically start rotating this dart, so we put all the dart in the bottom of this block here. Okay, so we have these lovely pleats. So first what I want to do is I'm going to get rid of these little lines. So small selection tool, let's just get rid of this, backspace, 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 backspace. And then I'm going to get my small selection tool, I'm going to click on this line here and that will locate that point. I'm going to click and drag that point into the bust point. Same with this one, click and drag my small selection tool until they are, let's say, united at this center point. This just allows me to be able to rotate this without any issues. Next what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my small selection tool, I'm going to click on the outline, I'm going to go to Pathfinder, which is just here, or you can go to Window and then, where is it, Pathfinder, and that will bring up this little dialog box. And I'm going to go to the Unite option. And what that does is that basically separates, you see, that separates those two blocks. So they're now two individual pieces, whereas before they were, if I do that, they were one, you can see. So I'm just going to use the Pathfinder, and now they're individual blocks. So next I'm going to get my small selection tool. I want to rotate this left panel completely. So I want to close this dart here and open it up at the bottom. But first of all, I actually want to take this line with me, but it's actually spanning the whole block. So I'm going to get my small selection tool. I'm just going to get my cut tool, which is here, and I'm just going to snip. There we go. Now, as you can see, it's one element, which is great. So I'm going to get my small selection tool, and I'm going to hold down the Shift and Command keys. What that does is, in fact, no, let's not do that. Let's get the big selection tool. I'm going to click, And you see how this is all grouped? Let's go Object and then Ungroup. I'm going to get my big selection tool. I'm going to click and drag over the elements that I want to select. Oh, hang on, it's still... You might have to ungroup a few times. So now I'm going to get the big selection tool. I'm going to click and drag over this left-hand piece because I want to keep all of this in this. I want to keep these all contained together. Okay, so I want these elements to all stay with this while I rotate it. So I'm getting the big selection tool, clicking and dragging, and then I'm going to go Object and then Group. So that's great. Let's go to the right-hand piece and let's just select the elements on the right-hand piece and go Object and then Group. So now if I click on them, they're two separate elements, but they're all grouped. So I'm going to get my big selection tool. I'm going to click on this panel here. I'm going to go to my rotate tool, which is just here, or you can hit R on your keyboard, and I'm going to, let's zoom in, I'm going to click just on that bust point, and I'm going to simply click and drag, and you can see that block is actually closing and rotating closed. So we're distributing all of the dart from here to the bottom, which is great. Next I want to unite these two blocks together. I don't want this line anymore. So I'm going to get my small selection tool, click and drag over these two elements, so we've just got the outline, and I'm going to go to Pathfinder and then Unite. And as you can see, it's united the bottom bit, not the top, but that's fine. We're going to go to the Remove Anchor Point tool or Delete Anchor Point tool and just remove those points. There we go, so it's now one lovely block. Let's just drag that line out. So to do that, small selection tool, just going to drag that line out to there. I'm going to drag this line in so it's nice and clean. Next we need to move this dart, because it can't be the bust, otherwise we'll have pointy bust. So I'm going to move this dart to this location here, but I need to find the center of this dart. And to do that, we're going to go to our line tool, which is, where have I put it? Okay, it's in here, but yours should be just on your panel. I'm going to click and drag from this point to this point to create a line, and as you can see there's a little blue point, and that is the middle of that line. So next with the line tool, I'm going to click on this point and drag until, as you can see, it intersects that point. So that is the center of that dart. Next we get our small selection tool, click on the line to find the point. Let's zoom in. I'm going to click on that line with a small selection tool to find the point, click and drag down. There we go, and so we know that that is the center of that dart, and we want to go for the bust radius here, so we've got a little bit of distance from the bust to prevent that pointy bust. I'm going to get my small selection tool, click on this line, hit backspace a few times, backspace a few times. Okay, so now we've put all of our dart rotation into the bottom of this basic bodice block, which is looking great. Okay, so next I'm going to mark the center front line, because essentially with the wrap dress, we're going to be wrapping past the center front. So imagine this is the center front line, we're going to be going past that. So we need to mark our center front and then go past it. So let's go to our small selection tool. I'm going to click on this line here, go to my cut tool, I'm going to snip, snip, and I'm also going to do the same on the skirt as well. So snip and snip. I'm going to get my small selection tool, I'm going to hold down the shift key and just simply, so I'm just going to simply drag over this line, hold down the shift key, drag over this line, and then let's change this. Let's make it, let's give it a dash line, and let's make it 30 and 10. And click off, and as you can see that denotes a dash line. This is what I use to denote a center front or a fold line. And you can do that just simply by selecting that line, going to the stroke palette, which is this 3 lines, and then obviously changing it, clicking on dash line here, and then entering the values 30, 10. Okay, great, so that's our center front line, which is looking great. So next what we're going to do is we want to figure out how much crossover we're going to have with this pattern. So look, it's just going ever so slightly past that dart, okay, probably by about 2 or 3 centimeters. So I'm going to measure, as you can see here, this is my dart, I'm going to measure, so I'm going to get my line tool, I'm going to click and drag, and there's a little grey box that appears, and it says 8.16 centimeters. Which is great. So I know that that dart is 8.16 centimeters wide. So I'm going to, let's say, go 2.5 further over that dart to conceal it slightly. So I'm looking at 8.16 plus 2.5. So to do that, what we're going to do is I'm going to take this center line, small selection tool, click on the center line, hold down the shift key, click on the center front line of the skirt as well. I'm going to hit enter on my keyboard, and I'm going to go, right, so what was it, 8.16 plus 2.5, and you can actually do that calculation in this little box as long as it's simple. And vertical, we're not going to go vertical at all, it's just horizontal to the right. So it's going to be 8 plus 2.5, we don't really need the 8.16, and click copy. And that is our crossover point. Okay, so that is where this dress is going to end. That's our center front, that's 10 centimeters. Or sorry, yeah, 8 plus 2.5 gives us this line here. Looking fab. And also it's not center front, so I'm going to change that line style. So small selection tool, click and drag over those two lines. I'm going to go to my eyedropper tool, which is I think L or I on your keyboard as well. I'm just going to go for click this line, and the eyedropper basically allows you to pick up the attributes of that line. So you select the line first, go to the eyedropper, and then just select. Great. Okay, so let's have a look at our drawing. In fact, I'm going to pull this into this document. There we go. Okay, let's make it a little bit smaller. So let's have a look. At this point, let's go slightly higher than the actual waistline. I'm going to go up by about 1.5. So first of all, let's draw our waistline across and our bust line. So get your small selection tool, click on that line to find the point, click in the point and drag. And if you're a little bit all over the place, hold down the Shift key and it will lock it to that horizontal. Click on that line to find the point, click on the point, drag it, hold down the Shift key to lock it to the horizontal. So this is my waistline, and I want to go up by about 1.5 centimeters. So let's just create a point. To do that, I'm going to go to my ellipse tool. Let's go to a line color. Let's go for a nice blue so we can actually see it. And I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key. And the Shift key basically prevents you from drawing an ellipse, so it will always be a circle. So let's just draw a little circle. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to place this, so I'm going to get my big selection tool, I'm going to click on the center of that and place it just on that point there. So once again, click my big selection tool, and now I'm going to move it up by 1.5 centimeters. So to do that, I'm going to select it, and I'm going to hit the Enter key on my keyboard. I'm going to go 0 horizontally, because we're not going along, and I'm going to tab down to vertical, and I'm going to go minus 1.5. I'm putting in minus because minus goes up, positive goes down. When it's horizontal, it's positive goes forwards and minus goes back. So we're going up, minus, up by 1.5. Hit copy, and that is, let's just check it, that is 1.5 centimeters up, which is fab. So that is where the start of this sweeping curve is going to be. I'm going to take this point, so big selection tool, just going to select that point, I'm going to edit and copy it, and I'm going to paste it. So just hit Control V on your keyboard. I'm going to paste it into this shoulder point. Now, let's just say, for example, the measurement here is going to be about 7 centimeters. I'm just guessing, but you can obviously measure that from the shoulder tip and decide where you want that neckline to start. So I'm going to get my big selection tool, select this point, hit the Enter key on my keyboard, and go 7.5. And we're going horizontally to the right, so it's a positive move, so 7.5, and 0 vertically. I'm going to hit copy. Great, so that is 7.5 centimeters. We know that by just measuring it. See, the grey box is 7.5. What I'm going to do is get my big selection tool. I'm going to click on this point, and I'm going to rotate it. Click my rotation point, click my rotation tool, sorry. Click on this point here, and I'm going to rotate it up. The reason why we're rotating it is because we're always maintaining 7 centimeters or 7.5 cm from that existing or starting point. So I'm just going to move it up till it hits the shoulder line. Great, so these are my two locations. Okay, this point and this point is where I'm going to draw this lovely sweeping curve. To be fair, 7.5 is quite large. I'm going to go for more like 5.5. Copy. You can do whatever you like. Great, so these are my 2 points. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my pen tool, which is just here. It's P on your keyboard as a shortcut. I'm going to click on this point and also this point to draw a line. Now, I've still got this thing hanging around, so I'm just going to click on the big section tool to remove it. So this is my new line. Now, I want to curve this because it is a nice, beautiful sloping curve. I don't want it straight. So I'm going to go to my anchor point tool, which is Shift and C on your keyboard. I'm going to click on this top point here, click, and then I'm going to drag. And as you can see, you can create curved lines just by going in and out, and obviously around and around. So I'm just going to simply drag this down. I'm going to use my bust line. So you see how that bezier, on my click and drag, that bezier, I'm going to move it along that bust line. And you know what, I'm just going to have it to just slightly come on the left hand side of that center front line. Okay, so the overlap is going to be just below the bust point. If that's too low for you, you can always go slightly higher up to maybe meet that bust point, or perhaps you want something really scooping. It might be a little bit too deep a scoop, but it's up to you. So this is where you can control the curve of that neckline. But I'm going to go, oops, roughly about there. That looks like a nice smooth curve to me. Because it's a blue line, let's just double click on this little stroke option, and let's go to black, click OK, and now it's black. Great, so we're now slowly getting there. But first I want to get rid of all of this information and clean up my block. So I'm going to get my small selection tool, I'm going to click on this point here, I'm going to click and drag it down to meet that new neckline. Same with the bust line, I'm going to click and drag this in. You can also hold down the shift key if you can't get it perfect. Same with the center front, click and drag it down to about there. Same with that chest line or cross chest measurement line. And then here I'm going to simply, with my small selection tool, select this line, get my cut tool, I'm going to cut it just at that point. And then small selection tool, click and drag, and then just hit backspace a few times. So this is our new, let's say, block, and I'll demonstrate how it works in a minute. But first of all, we've got a few more things to do. Small selection tool, I'm going to click on this point here, hit backspace a few times, just get rid of those points. Same here, backspace. I might actually, big selection tool, I might just edit and copy that. So edit, copy, I can use that paste later. Let's just delete it. So next what we're going to do is we're going to clean this block up. So at the moment they're all individual lines and they're not really joined and it's going to be a bit of a mess. So I'm going to get my small selection tool, I'm going to click and drag over these 2 points, I'm going to right click, join. Same again here, click and drag, right click, join, right click, join, and then finally, just to make sure it's one complete item, I'm going to go to Pathfinder and click Unite. Looking good. Next what I'm going to do is, because at the moment this isn't actually grouped, so if I moved it, you'd lose all the information. I'm going to get my big section tool, click and drag over this whole element here. Looks like something else is included. Okay, this line's included in our group, so what we do is, big section tool, click on that, go Object, Ungroup, just to remove it from that selection, and then going to click and drag over this whole element at the top, make sure nothing else is included, and go Object, and then Group. Now it's one item that I can move around, looking good. What I'm also going to do is for the skirt, just to clean this up, I'm going to get my waistline, I'm going to select the line with my small selection tool, click that point, drag it across, same with the hip line, click and drag that across, and then we can just click and drag, right click, join, click and drag, right click, join. Great, so we're getting there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how this block interacts. So this is our center front line, so essentially this is where the 2 blocks will cross. I'm going to get my big selection tool, you don't have to do this. I'm going to right click, I'm going to click transform and reflect, vertical, copy, and so now we have 2, and I'm just going to drag to match up those 2 center front lines. So as you can see, this is how your block is going to interact with itself. So if I give that a fill, it might give you a better idea. Okay, there we go. So as you can see, this one will cross over, and this one's going to be behind. You can see that that crossover is just 2 centimeters or 2.5 cm past that dark line on both sides. So that's looking awesome. I'm going to just delete that because we don't need it. So next, what we're going to do, let's have a look. Ties and double. Okay. Alright, so next on our agenda is to make this beautiful tie. So we have this little bit here, this 1.5, which is where we're going to attach our tie. So if you imagine, this is where our tie is going to be attached to. So we're actually going to draw this. So I'm just going to get my rectangle tool, which is M on your keyboard. I'm just going to find a little spare, or a little space here. I'm going to click. I'm not going to click and drag. I'm just going to click. And here I'm going to put the width of this. Okay, so your ties can be as long as you like. I'm going to guess this. I'm going to put in 100 centimeters, so it's going to be 100 cm long. So essentially when it comes from this point here, it's going to go around the back, tie up and then drape down. I'm going to call that about 100 centimeters. You can always measure this around your waist and make sure it's the right length, but I'm going to say 100 because I want to be quite quick. The height is going to be 1.5 cm. Now the reason why is because this is 1.5 cm. You could always make it ever so slightly less, just so you've got a little bit of extra give around here, but I'm going to make it 1.5. So we have a rectangle that's going to be 100 cm long and 1.5 high. Click OK. And this is our very long strap. Let's just turn that into black and white. So this is one side, but essentially we want to double this over and then stitch it. So we'd want a fold line here and the same on the other side. And I'll just do that quickly to demonstrate. So let's get our big selection tool. I'm going to click on this line here, and I'm going to drag it down to this bottom bit. But before I let go, I'm going to hold down the Option key, and that, you see how we get those 2 little arrows? That means you're copying it. So if you click and drag and place it just below that that rectangle or our strap, hold down the Option key and that will copy it when you let go. So this is now our strap. I'm going to get my big selection tool, I'm going to click and drag over both these elements. I'm then going to unite them, so I'm going to join them together, just like that. I'm then going to get a line. Let's go to my line tool. I'm just going to find the center. You see how it's automatically finding the center for me. I'm just going to click and drag, holding down the shift key. It's quite long, so I'm going to get my small selection tool, click on that point, drag it, holding down the shift key, and that will be the center of my, let's say, my strap. And I'm going to turn this into a fold line. So I'm going to get my small selection tool, click on it, go to my stroke, and then go dashed line. Let's go 30 and 10. And there is our lovely fold line. Going to get my big selection tool. Where is it? It's here. I'm just going to click and drag over these two elements, and I'm going to go Object, and then Group. So that is now my strap. And you know what? To take up less real estate on this page, I'm going to get my big selection tool, I'm going to click, and then I'm going to get the corner here. I'm going to rotate. Holding down the Shift key will lock it to the horizontal, vertical, and diagonal. So I'm going to lock it to vertical. I'm just going to chuck it in here for now, so we can actually see it. So that's my strap. So next we need actually an opening. So let's just zoom in here. We're going to have an opening on the opposite side for that strap of the inner one to come out of. So let's just do that now. So let's paste in my point. Don't forget I copied that to my clipboard. So this is my little point. I'm going to click and drag that over to the waistline on the side seam here. So we're going to be making this little hole. And you know what? I want it to be slightly bigger than my actual strap width, which is 1.5. So I'm going to go to my big section tool, click on that point, hit the enter key. We're going to go 0 horizontally, but we're going to go up, which is minus, by, let's do an opening of 2 centimeters. So 1.5, 2 centimeters, we've got a bit of leeway either side of it. Let's just hit copy. And there is our opening. But we want this to line up on this line, so let's go to the rotation tool, click on that point, click and drag until it meets the side seam. And here we can actually start adding some notches. So to add a notch, we're going to go to our line tool. I'm just going to click, and I'm going to add 1 centimeter seam allowance to this pattern. So I'm going to hit 1 cm, and the angle can be 0, and click OK. And this is our little notch. So I'm going to get my big selection tool, going to click on that point there, drag it over, and place it where that point is. And I can actually, let's just rotate it. Click on that point, rotate it up ever so slightly. And you know what? I'm going to create a new one as well. So edit, copy, edit, paste. I'm going to add that here as well. And I can actually now just get rid of those points. Don't actually need them anymore, which is great. In fact, let me just copy that. Okay, and you know what? We don't want them to be blue. So let's just select those, go to my eyedropper tool, select that line. Great. And you know what, just to make sure that we don't lose them, I'm going to just select everything on the big selection tool and go Object, Group. Fab, so that's going to be our opening. And we can also add that to the back block as well, but we'll do that later. Next, we're going to start working on our skirt. So right now, we've got a very, very tiny skirt. In fact, it probably only goes to about there. So it's almost like a top. You could essentially have this as just a top if you like. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the length of this. So I'm going to get a point, paste it in. I'm going to click and drag that and put it at the center front on the front of the skirt. Now I'm going to guess, so normally from waist to knee is about 60 centimeters for most average height women. So I'm going to go slightly longer. I'm going to go about 70 centimeters to 75 centimeters, so 10 centimeters longer than the knee length. Once again, you can measure this. If you are, just measure it from the waist and to wherever the hem that you want, wherever you want the hem to finish. Measure it from the waist to the end of the hem, and then add that measurement. So once again, I'm just going to place my point just there, just at the waistline, but on the center front. Hit my enter key on the keyboard. I'm not going to go horizontal. I'm going to go vertically down, and I'm going to go 75 centimeters. Hit copy. You might have to zoom out to see it. So there we go. We can zoom in. Hang on. Zoom in, zoom out. There we go. So we can see that point just there. So now I've got my point mark. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this skirt out. Unfortunately we can't because we have some beziers here, but that's fine. We're going to go to our Convert Anchor Point tool, and I'm just going to click on this point and also on this very lower point here. And what that does is that removes those curves. So now when I drag it, you can see it's a straight line. It's simple. I'll just do that again. With this line, you see how we've got these little beziers here? You want to get rid of them? Just go to your Anchor Point tool, which is Shift-C on your keyboard. Click on this point, and then this side, you see the 2 points? Click on the lower one, and that will remove that bezier. And now what I'm going to do is, you can see my points just down here. I'm going to get my small selection tool, I'm going to click on that line and drag. And I want to hold down my Shift key to lock it to the vertical. drag it down until we get to the center of that point. Okay, great. So now we have increased the length of our skirt. I also want to include these little labels here, I guess. So small selection tool, I'm going to click and drag over those two endpoints. Click and drag, hold down the shift key to lock it to the vertical, and just take it to the end of the hem, which is great. I'm going to do the same. Okay, I'm going to do the same for the back. So this the front is done, which is great. Let's do the same for the back. So once again, let's zoom in. Let's get to our convert anchor point tool. Click on this one. Click on that lower point, just there. And then next, let's zoom out, and I'm just going to get my small selection tool. Click and drag, hold down the shift key to make sure it's always vertical. And then we're just going to, you see how it's lining up with this bottom edge here. And also, once again, small selection tool, click on this point, click and drag, hold down the shift key to lock it to the vertical. There we go. Right, that's my skirt length done. Now we have a very slight A-line flare on this. So in other words, if I was to go directly from the hip, that would be the block that we have at the moment. But we have a little kick, a very, very simple A-line kick. So to do that, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to paste in that little point. I'm going to simply click and drag that to the corner, the bottom side seam corner of my back piece, and also my front piece, like that. So you can just simply paste another one, and then obviously big section tool, click and then drag it to that point there. Right, we're going to go out by about 6 centimeters. It's up to you how much flare you want to do or how much kick. So I'm going to get my big section tool, select this point, hit the enter key, and I'm going to go 6 centimeters horizontally, 0 vertically, and click copy. That's quite a lot actually, isn't it? Oh well, that's quite a lot. I'm going to move these blocks apart ever so slightly, just so we've got a bit more space. I'm selecting all of them because I want to keep them in line, just moving them over. Okay, let's put that point back where it was, and here I'm going to do -6 because we're going over to the left, and 0 vertically, hit copy. That's great. So now what I can do is, I can then get my small selection tool, I can select that line to find the point. Select that line to find the point, click and then drag, hold down the shift key to lock it to the horizontal, and move that point out. Same here, click that point, drag it out. So that's my new A-line flare. However, we've got this really weird sort of like kink just here, okay, and we want to basically remove that. So if you imagine a straight line going from this point up to the, let's say, the hip curve, we want to find out whereabouts on that line on the side seam where it would create a nice smooth even curve into that, let's say, line coming from the hem. Does that make sense? So once again, we want to smooth this kink out, and to do that I'm going to go draw a line from this point all the way up to my side seam here. So that would be too much of a kink, that would be overkill, we'd lose some of our hips. I want to find the nice even point just here. So with that point, it's roughly about here, I'm going to get my small selection tool, I'm going to click on this line, and as you can see, that's where my line goes to. I'm going to get my plus anchor point tool, I'm going to hit plus, and then I'm going to get my minus anchor point tool, I'm just going to minus that, and as you can see, that has created a really beautiful, lovely smooth curve. I'm going to do the same once again. So as you can see here, this is the point at which we removed that little divot. So we can always just translate across, draw a line across, and then here I'm going to get my small selection tool, I'm going to click on this line, click the plus anchor point tool, so we're adding an anchor point just here, and then we can go minus and then remove the lower one, and that gives us a really beautiful A-line curve over the hip. Okay, there's one last thing we need to do when it comes to the skirt. Let's just remove these points. So here, if I were to join these two blocks together, it would be a bit of a nightmare, we'd have a bit of a point. So let's just move that over. Let's rotate it to close those side seams. We would have a point, and that's not cool. Essentially what we need is a nice smooth sort of like line joining these two together. So to do that, it's really simple. Hang on. That's better. Let's get rid of these points. So to do that, I'm going to go up ever so slightly and then curve that line. So I'm going to grab both these points, so get my big section tool, click, hold down the shift key, click to queue up the selection, hit the enter key, 0, and then we're going to go minus, let's take it up by about 4 centimeters, hit copy. Great, and then we're just going to simply, big section tool, click on this point here, let's just rotate it in, like, to find that line, Same with this one. Let's click on that point. Let's click on that point for rotation. Move it in. Oh, eventually. There we go. And now I'm going to draw. So with my pen tool, I'm going to click on the middle of that point, and I'm going to go to my center front line. I'm not going to go here. I'm going to go to my center front line. I'm just going to simply click and then drag. I'm going to hold down the shift key to lock that beautiful curve. And if you can see that little blue point just here, this is the point that we're basically moving, and we want it to be about halfway between the center front line and the side seam. That will give us a really beautiful, lovely curve. Okay, so roughly halfway between these 2 points. Great, so that's my curve on this side. Let's do the same on the opposite side. So I'm going to get my pen tool, I'm going to click on this point, and then I'm going to go to my center back, because we don't have this extension here. I'm going to go to my center back, click, and then drag. And once again, halfway between the center back and the side seam, roughly about there. So now we have our beautiful curve. We need to get rid of the bottom of this and join this line to our skirt. So I'm going to go small selection tool, click on this, let's say outline here, get my scissor tool, I'm going to snip here, and I'm going to snip at the center front so we can add that line. Same with the back. I'm going to get my small selection tool, select this line, get the scissor tool, snip, snip, and then small selection tool, I can just click and drag over these bits here, backspace, I can get rid of these points as well. You might have to zoom in, backspace, backspace, select it, backspace, backspace, and now we need to join this line to here, to these. So I'm just going to simply small selection tool, click and drag, right click, join, do the same here, right click, join, and then just to unite these blocks, just to make sure there are no openings, because at the moment we've probably got one there, we have. I'm just going to select the outline, go to my Unite or Pathfinder, and click Unite. Same with this one, I'm just going to select the outline, Unite. Great, so that's our little A-line kick, which is looking lovely, and we also have our strap, so what is next? Okay, we're going to make some facings for this dress, because you can't really have this as a raw open edge. It's going to be a bit of a nightmare. So we're going to make some facings, and by facings I mean this. So if I join these 2 blocks together, I then place this over the top, you can see that that is a facing, and you even have a hem facing as well. This just basically keeps your block nice and clean, it finishes off any raw edges, etc. See, there's also a facing for this as well. So we're now going to make the facing. Essentially, you don't necessarily have to do this part if you'd rather just stick to the wrap dress tutorial. This is a little bit extra, and we do have tutorials on how to do custom facings for necklines, but it'd be good to chuck this in just to kind of complete this dress. Okay, so to create a facing, what we're going to do is we're simply going to join these blocks up, or at least place them together so that we can actually trace a facing. So with my big selection tool, I'm going to click on this block. Oh, and look, they're not actually grouped, so we want to make sure, first of all, big selection tool, click over all these elements, go object, and then group. And we're just simply, let's check, yep, this one's grouped, that's good. Get my big selection tool, I'm going to click on this line and drag it up, hold down the shift key, so it locks to the vertical. I'm just going to join it to that line. So now essentially those 2 blocks are joined, or at least placed together so we can actually trace off a facing. So for my facing, I'm going to get my pen tool. I'm going to click a point on my shoulder here. Now I'm going to actually attach a sleeve to this, so I'm not going to do a facing for the sleeve as well. It's just going to be the neckline. So I'm going to put a point just about 2/3 along that line. Let's zoom in. I'm going to put a point just about here. I'm then going to go down, and let's go for my center front line. I'm going to click a point not at the waistline, but just a little bit further down. Click and drag. I'm just going to drag a nice smooth curve. So we have a nice smooth curve coming into this line. I'm going to go down to the bottom, and I'm just going to simply click. I'm then going to trace off, click, go up. I'm going to click here. I'm going to click a point here and here. Now that's great. That's our facing. But however, we need to make sure that we're aligning its tracing on our neckline, and also this needs to be a slightly smoother curve as well. So I'm going to get my convert anchor point tool. I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to hold it. I'm going to use my bust line, so let's just zoom in. I'm going to use my bust line here to create a nice smooth curve. So that looks quite nice, it kind of matches my neckline quite well. Do the same for this one, click and drag this point. Okay, we've got a little bit of weirdness going on up here. Let's go back. I'm going to drag this handle in so it's straight again. I'm going to click this point. Okay, so we're going the opposite direction, so I'm going to move that over there, move that one back in. I'm going to small selection tool, select that line to get that point, click and drag. Remember, we used our bust line to find that line, so I'm just going to move it until it's pretty much
tracing that line, and it is, which is great. Let's just make it 2 points so you can actually see that facing. So that is our lovely facing, which is looking fabulous. So next I want to add a few notches to this. I want to know where my pattern intersects here. So I'm going to get my line tool. I'm just going to click, I'm going to go 1 centimeter because I'm using 1 cm seam allowance, click OK. I'm going to get my big selection tool, I'm going to simply, let's just copy this, edit, copy, and then we can paste it in wherever we want it. I'm going to click and drag this to my waistline, so I'm now indicating on that facing that this is where my waistline is. I'm going to paste in another one, I'm going to click and drag it to this side, I'm going to paste another one in, and I'm going to click and drag it to my bust line. Oh, I haven't got that quite right. Let's click and drag that again. Oh, sorry. Click and drag it to that point there. Now, I always like to have my notches actually at right angles. So there we go. Let's paste another one in. We can also add one here to our bodice block to show where that facing is. Just going to rotate it to make it 90-degree angle. It's not quite a 90-degree angle. There we go. What else do we need? And let's also paste one in and add it to here. And then we can hit rotate and then rotate it out. Okay, so let's start adding some lines and grouping. So let's go to our line tool, and I'm going to add, I want to add in my center front. I want to indicate on my facing where the center front line is. And I can go to my eyedropper tool and just simply pick that fold line or that center front line to match with the bodice. Let's also put in my bust line as well. We probably don't need that point or that notch if we put in the bust line. Eyedropper tool, pick up that line, and let's do the same here. I'm just going to move that straight across. Okay, great. And you know what? We can even put one in here as well for the waist. So we're putting a lot of information onto this panel piece. So now we've got a lot of lines going on, but we need to start grouping them and moving it away. So I'm going to get my big selection tool. I'm going to select, first of all, my facing, which is this. I'm going to hold down the shift key. I'm going to select this line, this line, this line. I'm also going to select this notch. We've also got another notch here and here. And I'm going to leave that for the bodice, and I'm going to leave that for the skirt. So now with all those pieces selected, I'm going to object and then group. So now if I move it away, and let's just remove or place all this stuff over here. There we go. Now if I move it away, you can see, there we go, that's my facing, looking great. I've got my waistline on there. For some reason that line didn't go with it, but that's okay, we can move that across. And then we can just object, group that line in, and that's looking great. So now what I'm going to do is I can then separate these blocks off again. So I get my big selection tool, click, and then drag it down, hold down the shift key to lock it to the vertical there, and drag that down. So that's the facing for that is the facing panel. It's been traced off these two blocks. And once again, we've got these little notches involved here. So I'm just going to simply big selection tool, click and drag, and then go object, group. So that now if I move it, it's one item, which is great. Next, we're going to do the facing on the back, and also we need the neckline on the back as well. Because at the moment, we actually don't have a neckline. So this little area here, if it's attached to this, would have this big bit of open gaping mess on the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the distance between this point and this point. So I'm going to get my line tool. I'm going to click at this point and drag, and as you can see in the grey box, it's saying 5.5 centimeters, which is great. So now I'm going to go to my back panel, and let's just create a point quickly. I'm going to place it at this point here. I'm going to hit the enter key and I'm going to go minus 5.5 because we're moving to the left. And vertically we're going 0. I'm going to hit copy. I'm then going to click my rotation tool, click rotate, and then rotate it to that line. Now luckily it's falling within that dart, so I don't actually have to use that dart in any way whatsoever. So next I'm going to draw in my neckline. So I'm going to go from this point, and you can click it anywhere on this back. So we could have a neckline like that, for example. We could have a neckline like this, we could have a neckline anywhere you wanted it. It's completely up to you. You can even measure down from the nape of the neck to how far you want to go. I'm going to go down just by looking at it, roughly about, what's that, probably about 2 centimeters. I'm then going to click my point. So let's do that properly. I'm going to click from this point. I'll have located the back of my dress. Click and then drag. Hold down the shift key to lock it to the horizontal, and just drag it out till it's about 2/3 of the way between the center back and this point. So that point there, the handle, is 2/3 of the way between these points here. Then to get rid of this line, just click on that little small selection tool. So that's my back neckline, but I want to remove all of this this mess here. So to do that, I'm going to get my small selection tool, click on the outline, go to the scissor tool, snip, and then snip at these two locations. And I can just simply select this, my small selection tool, and hit backspace a few times. And there is my new neckline. And we can probably get rid of this line as well. So I'm then going to get rid of my points, small selection tool, backspace a few times, and now I'm going to join. So at the moment, this isn't joined to my pattern. So I'm going to get my small selection tool, click and drag over those two endpoints, right click, join, right click, join. So that's now complete, and we can just make sure just by going to Pathfinder and then Unite. Great, so now we need to create our back neckline facing. So, like we did with the shoulder, I'm going to get my line tool, I'm going to measure the distance between here and here, or you can measure the distance between here and here, which is 3.71 centimeters. So I know that I need to go from this point 3.7 centimeters. So we can just create our point if you like. So let's just create a point here. And let's just go, so I'm going to select that point with my big section tool, hit enter, 3.71, 0 on the vertical, hit copy. I'm going to go to my rotate tool, rotate at this point, there we go. So I mean, this could be considered quite complicated, but essentially we are only using a few tools. It's just this big selection tool, small selection tool, the add point, curvature, and also the rotation tool. So if you keep using it, you will eventually get the hang of it. Okay, so now we have the marked point, which is essentially this point here. I'm going to get my pen tool, click on this point. I'm going to go down roughly by about 3.71. I'm going to wing it. Let's make it about here. Click and drag using the shift key to lock it to the horizontal, and I'm going to create a line roughly like that. Next I'm going to trace off, so I'm going to get this point, 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 and then join it. Next, convert anchor point tool, click and drag until we match that curvature of the line of the neckline, and then just move that handle in. Great, let's then just add a notch, so 1 centimeters. Add it to that point, rotate until it's about 90-degree with the shoulder line there. I can get rid of these points, great. And next I'm going to get my big section tool, I'm going to click and drag this off. So as you can see here, we have just traced it off, so that's my pattern piece for my facing. And what I can do is get my big section tool, click on this point, move it over to here and match these up, click the rotation tool, and rotate it close. You can see how clean or non-clean that curve is. So we've got quite a dramatic shaped neckline here, but that's fine. And I'm reasonably happy with that. You could always move this out ever so slightly, make it a little bit more curved, or possibly you could curve it from here, like that for example. It's up to you how you want to create your facing. I mean, that's not too bad. Let's just move it in a little bit. There we go. So I'm happy with that. And then I'm just going to simply get my big section tool, I'm going to click on this point, take it back, rotation tool, rotate it back to where it used to be. This is simply because when we add our grain line, we want this to be matching our block. Okay, so we just translate that over to see what the curvature was like, and now we're translating it back so we can add that grain line. Okay, so that is my block with my facing. There's one more thing to do when it comes to facing. So, let's just move that little point down there. Sorry, my notch was in the wrong place. Let's just move it down. There we go. Okay, so next what we're going to do is I want to create a hem to this dress as well. So I'm going to move my facing back in, just like that. Let's just, you can nudge it around. So hang on, let's just do that again. Move it over. So I'm going to get my big selection tool. I'm going to click on, let's say, this point here, and I'm just going to match it to my skirt. And you can always use the arrow keys to nudge it. So you can nudge it around with the arrow keys to make sure you're in the right location. So now we need to add a facing to the bottom here. You don't have to, but I'm going to do it. So to start off with, what I'm going to do is I am going to get my pen tool. I'm going to click a point here and here. In fact, no, let's actually measure this. So I'm going to get a point. I'm going to create a point here. And I'm going to create a point here. And I'm also going to create a point on the back and also here as well. I'm then going to select all of these points, the big selection tool, hold down the shift key, select all of those points, I'm then going to hit the Enter key, and I'm going to go up by, let's have a hem of about 4 centimeters, or a hem facing of 4 centimeters. I'm then going to click Copy. Wrong way. 0, -4 to go up, and then +4 to go down. Let's click Copy, and that's our 4 centimeters. Doesn't look that big. Let's go 5, Copy. There we go. So these points I'm going to rotate in. You know how to do that. We've explained that. Click that, rotate it in, and now I can draw my facing. So I'm going to get my pen tool. I'm going to click this point, this point, this point, this point, and this point. Same with this side. Pen tool, pen tool, pen tool, pen tool. There we go. And now I'm going to get my Convert Anchor Point tool. Click on this point. Translate that out until it matches the hem of my skirt. We can just pull this one in. Same with this one here. I'm going to move it out. I'm not going to be too precise with this, just so it is roughly parallel to my skirt. Move this point in. Same with this one. Click and drag until it matches the hem of my skirt. Move this point in. Click and drag this point so it's roughly parallel here. And then move that point in. And these are my facings, which is looking great. And I can now just remove these points. Fabulous. And you know what? I can even add a little notch there just to indicate on that front facing where the, let's say, skirt facing or the hem facing is located. So next we can just move this off. Big section tool, click and drag, hold down the Shift key to lock it to the vertical. There we go. And now we can just simply click on this point, click on our facing, and then go Object and then Group. So now when I move it away, you can see that we have the notch on there for the hem facing. So great, we've created all of the facings for our dress here, which is looking fantastic. So next what we're going to do is we're going to finish off the block by adding seam allowance, and we can also add in a few other notches if we need to. And we're also going to turn these into fold lines, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now get my small selection tool. I'm going to click on the outline of all of these, even this one, even my strap here, and if we want to use the sleeve, we can do the same for the sleeve, although we've done no styling to the sleeve whatsoever. Oh, and don't forget, this is our back neckline facing. So once again, hold down the Shift key, click. Then we're going to go Object, and then to add one click seam allowance to this, we're going to go to Object, Path, and then Offset Path, and we're going to have 1 cm. Don't worry about the mitre limit, click, and it's previewing for you. You can see what is actually happening to that block. Oops. Click OK. Great, so we've now added seam allowance very easily and very accurately to our pattern pieces. And you know what, I always like to make this, the cut line is going to be 2 points, and then the inner line, let's just select all of those inner lines, so this is the actual pattern line, we're going to make those 1 point. Okay, so it's nice and clean. Oh look, we forgot these hem ones. Let's go to Object, Path, Offset Path, 1, click OK. Let's make that 2 points, it already is. Let's make the inner one 1 point. There we go, looking great. So let's just make sure that these are all grouped now. So the back panel is not grouped, so I'm just going to simply click with my big selection tool, click and drag over all of those, making sure the little notches in as well. I'm just going to go Object, Group, it's good practice. This one, this isn't grouped either, click and drag, Object, Group, just to make sure. Yeah, looking good. What about this one? That's all grouped, which is great. This one, that's all grouped as well, which is great. The skirt, that's all grouped as well. And the back skirt, this one's not, so click and drag big selection tool, Object, Group. And then these should already be grouped, they're not. Click and drag, Object, Group. Let's just group, and that's grouped already, which is great. Okay. So that is pretty much our pattern complete. Next we're just going to add our labels. So here we have, let's just add this in here. Oh, there's one more thing we need to do. So unless you want a seam on the back here, we kind of want this to be just a fold line. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply drag this line in. So small selection tool, click on that line, drag it in, but hold down the Shift key to make sure it is horizontal, and we can drag it in to that line. Same with this one, click and drag. The front we're not going to do anything with because there is no fold on the front at all. And then obviously here as well, click and drag for the fold line there. So now we're going to add our labels. So once again, just get your big selection tool. You can click and drag this anywhere. Let's place this on our block, roughly about somewhere in the middle there. You can also get your small selection tool, click and drag over this element. Let's zoom in, and you can move it over to here, for example. And at the moment this is underneath, so let's just get our big selection tool, click on this, and then go Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. As you can see, that's now sitting on top. And then we can also edit some of this text. So get your small selection tool, double click, and then here we can put, so basic wrap dress block, front upper panel, because obviously the skirt's separate and we don't need this hip length thing. We can call it A-line. You can add as much information as you want to this. UK 10, the bust ease is all there, or the eases, etc. That's great. Let's get the front one. So big selection tool, click and drag it in. Let's put it about, I don't know, here. You can probably find better locations for yours. And get the small selection tool. If this is outside, click on that line, find the point, click and drag, hold down the shift key. There we go. We can also small selection tool, and then we can just drag that off to a nice location. Just indicates that it is a size 10. And then here, once again, we can go basic wrap dress block. This is what, upper front panel, I guess. This could be A-line. Great. I might actually just copy and paste that. Copy, paste. Let's do this as, oh, I got that wrong, sorry. The back should actually, this shouldn't be front upper, this is back upper. Apologies, a bit useless when it comes to labels sometimes. And then we can also select this and go, let's bring it to the front, let's go edit, copy, and then we can just go paste, and we can put it onto our dress or our skirt as well. And then we can put this as front lower panel, or you can call it, what is it? Front skirt, up to you. Copy, let's paste that in here. Small selection tool, let's actually, oops, let's move that over to here somewhere. And then here we can call this back skirt panel. And you can do the same for the facings, it's completely up to you. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this because obviously we're just repeating. So what is this? Front facing panel, etc. So you can add that to all of your bits and pieces, all of your panels. It's completely up to you how you do that. And that's essentially your, what do you call it, your wrap dress finished. There is one other thing that we can do to really perfect this pattern, if you so want to, and it's basically this seam allowance. Seam allowance shouldn't really be inside the darts because it creates unstable darts. You kind of want to have a little witch's hat here, I'm not sure what they call it, like a widow's peak. And I'm going to show you how to do that now, but also you don't have to watch that if you don't want to. It's quite a long tutorial, so it's completely up to you. But essentially, that is our, let's say, wrap dress finished. And once again, we haven't done anything to the sleeve, but we do have tutorials on sleeves and how you can basically adjust this block into a variety of different sleeves to go with this dress, which is really cool. Okay. Okay, so let's have a look at creating a little witch's hat on this dart here to make it more stable when it comes to the seam allowance. So what I'm going to do first of all, as you can see, we've got to the stage where we've added our seam allowance, which is great. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that seam allowance away from the dart. So I'm going to get my scissor tool. I'm just going to snip about here. Actually, no, let's snip closer. I'm going to snip about here and here, okay? Just to remove that little panel. Small selection tool, click on it, and then backspace a few times. Next, what I want to do is I need to find the center of this dart. So I'm going to go to my line tool. I'm going to click and drag from point to point, and then going to click and drag from the center to that little blue. That's the center of that lower line here. Click and drag. So that is the center of my dart, which is great. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these two lines. We can actually make them dotted. I'm going to go Object and then Lock Selection. Okay, so now I can't actually select them. Next, I'm going to get my pen tool. And I'm going to, so let's say, for example, I want my material to come on this side, okay? I want my fold to be on this side. I want to take the opposite side, okay? So let's just click a point here, 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 and here. If, however, I wanted my dart to fold to this side, I would actually draw this, 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 and this. But we're folding to the inside, so I've drawn the opposite side. Let's just highlight this with some blue so you can actually see what's happening here. We can also remove the dashed line. Okay, so next we've drawn our little, let's say, half dart. I'm going to get my big section tool, I'm going to select it, go to my rotation tool, click on that point, and I'm going to take this point here, click and drag, and then fold it over. So imagine we're closing this dart completely. So with the current situation, this is how much fabric would be missing from the seam allowance, which is unacceptable. So what I'm going to do next is, let's just zoom in, I'm going to get my small selection tool, I'm going to click on this point, I'm going to drag it out, I'm dragging through that line, I'm dragging it out until we hit that hem. I don't want to be here, because obviously we're missing that line, I want to be just there. Okay, so now we've done that, this is essentially what we want our dart to do when it's folded over. So next I'm going to get my big selection tool, I'm going to click on that, let's say, half dart, go to my rotation tool, click on that point, and then I'm going to simply click and drag and rotate that out until we meet the center of that dart. Looking great. So next what we're going to do is, I'm going to get my plus anchor point tool, I'm going to add an anchor point to this line here. I'm going to get my small selection tool, click on that point and then drag it out to meet the opposite side. So now this is our witch's hat. So when we fold this dart, the material over to this side, it will stitch nicely into this seam here. So next I want to add this to my seam allowance, and to do that we're just going to get my small selection tool, click on this point, or click on this line, get my scissor tool, I'm going to snip here and here, and I don't actually need this anymore. So I'm going to get my small selection tool, click, and then hit backspace a few times. I can also get rid of these lines, although they're unselectable. So let's go Object, Unlock All. I'm going to get rid of this line. I'm going to get that point and drag it out to my witch's peak. And I also want to create seam allowance for this now. So I'm going to get my small selection tool, click on this little witch's peak, Object, Path, Offset Path. 1cm is already selected, click OK, you can preview it as well. And that is our new seam allowance, but it's a bit of a mess. So I'm going to get my small selection tool, I'm going to get my scissor tool, I'm going to snip here and here. I'm going to get my small selection tool, click this, hit backspace a few times, and now if I get my small selection tool, I can click and drag over these 2 points, right click, click average, both, OK, that will average those 2 points together, and then right click and then join. Once again, click these 2 points, or click and drag over these 2 points, right click, average, both, OK, and then join. And we can also go to our little eyedropper tool and just pick up the attributes of that cutting line. Same with this one. I can small selection tool, select this line, get my eyedropper tool, select that line there, and if you want to be really nifty, you can join this to this outline. And to do that, small selection tool, click on this pattern here, just go snip, snip. This we can always turn into a dashed line. And let's just go Object and then lock it. So I've locked that line there, and then here I'm just going to click and drag over those 2 points, right click, join, click and drag, right click, join, and then we're going to go Object and then unlock everything. And that's how we create a witch's peak. But obviously look, nothing's actually grouped, so let's just big section tool, click and drag over everything, Object, and then we're going to go group. And there we go. So if you've done that for, if you've, let's say your dart is going this direction. If your dart's going this direction on the top, then ideally it should go this direction on the bottom. So let's just do that once again, just to show you, just to reiterate. I'm going to select this outline with my small selection tool, scissors. I'm going to snip about there, so extending through that line. Click on this, hit backspace a few times. Next, we're going to find the location. Find the halfway point between these 2 points. So get my line tool, click and drag, and then as you can see there's that middle point. I'm going to click and drag my line once again up to that point. Small section tool, eyedropper, let's just turn those into dotted lines. Let's go Object and then lock selection. So once again, if we're going this direction, we want to trace the opposite side. So pen tool, click at this point, click at this point, click, click, And we can make this blue just so you can see it. Take the dash off. And next what we're going to do is we're going to, with the big selection tool, select this, go to rotation tool, click, take this line here, rotate it over, get our small selection tool, click on this point, extend through, and then bring it back to that line. Big selection tool, click on this, go to rotation tool, click rotate, and then move this back to this line here. We can then add anchor point to this point, small selection tool, click and drag. Then we go object, unlock all. We can then get rid of that little line there, hit backspace. Let's click and drag that up. Let's select this. Let's then snip, snip. We can then get rid of this lower section. Let's go object, path, offset path. Click OK. Get my scissor tool. Let's zoom in a little bit here. I'm going to cut it just about there, where those two lines intersect. And then hit backspace a few times. We can move this, there we go, to meet. I'm just going to get my small selection tool, click and drag over both, right click, join. Here these 2 points are slightly out, so I'm going to right click and then average, click OK, and then I'm going to join. Then I'm going to get my eyedropper tool, get that outline layer, click on this one, eyedropper tool, select that. And then we can now snip this. So small selection tool, select that outline again, snip, snip. We can then turn this with the eyedropper tool for a dashed line. Let's lock that down, lock selection, and then here, let's just click and drag with the small selection tool over those 2 points. Let's go average, hit OK, and then join. Once again, right click, average, OK, and then join. Might seem complicated, but once you get the hang of it, and once you do it a few times, it becomes quite simple. And then we're just going to go object, and then obviously unlock everything. We can also get rid of these little arrows too. So now we have this witch's hat, and those darts go over to this side, which is looking lovely. Essentially, this could even be a pleat. It doesn't have to be a sewn dart, which would be really lovely. So this is almost like a pleat rather than an actual dart. And we'd do exactly the same on the back. I'm not going to show you that because it's the same process, same technique. But essentially, that is it. That is your wrap dress constructed from that basic torso block. So if you want to get the basic torso block, once again, have a look at this post at the bottom, and we will give you links of how to actually achieve, or how to actually find that block and how to download and purchase it. I hope you enjoyed this day's tutorial, and I will see you next time. Thank you.